I'm very excited right now to be speaking with Marlo McKenzie and Jonathan Parker, the writers and directors of Carol Doda, Topless at the Condor. Honestly, Marlo, Jonathan, thank you so much for the time. I really do appreciate it. The film is fascinating.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Steve.
Absolutely. I was wondering why Carol? Where did the film come from? How did it begin?
Yeah, well, it has an unusual history. I knew Carol. I met her when she opened a lingerie shop on Union Street in San Francisco. This was in the late '90s, and my office was in the building in front, and I kind of overlooked her little shop in the courtyard, and I was like, "Whoa, Carol Doda! Wow!" I mean, because she was famous, and but I realized that I didn't really know her story. And so I became curious about it, and I started to research it. And I was really struck by how her career was launched by this strange confluence of random events. And that really intrigued me. So I started hanging out with her and I got to know her. And I was an aspiring filmmaker at the time. And so I pitched her the idea of doing a movie about her life, and she was receptive, and she let me follow her around for a while on script research journeys. She was doing a lot of MC, public appearance kind of gigs, and she was singing in a jazz standard combo. And anyway, we got pretty far into it, and I had written a lot of material. It wasn't going to be a documentary; it was going to be a dramatic feature, but ultimately it didn't come together. And I just kind of put all my notes in a drawer and almost forgot about them until 20 years later. Marlo and I were working together on a different project, and she found the file of notes, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yes, I found Jonathan's file of notes, and they looked very interesting. And it was kind of when the Me Too movement was just coming out, so it felt like a moment for women's stories to rise up. And I didn't know who she was, though, so I did some research, and a couple of things jump out right away. And one of them is the times are quite amazing. It's just before the sexual revolution, but also it's a time when women were more restricted in terms of what they could dream for themselves. And so for Carol to do what she did, where she decided to express herself in this way, it took a certain amount of courage that I really admired. And Jonathan and I talked, and we decided we would reopen the movie.
I love that you presented that way, because the truth is there are so many things going on in this film that connect with issues in the especially the last few years since Me Too movement and all of these things. But now, I mean, just hearing from you, Jonathan, like you've spent a lot of time with her. What sets Carol apart in your mind and yours as well, Marlo? What makes her so special?
Well, I mean, just judging from the time that I spent with her, she was a very funny person to hang out with. I mean, she just said funny things, and they were unexpected, and kind of had an originality to them that was quite specific. And she was very entrepreneurial. She couldn't dance anymore, so she was, had the lingerie store. She was also in the back of the store. There was a little loft, and she was doing her teledoda calls, where people would call in, and she'd kind of, talk in a sexy manner to them, and they would pay for that. So I just really just kind of genuinely, liked her. And to be able to do a project with her was an intriguing prospect. I think what made her so famous when she was performing is she was really quite candid with customers. She always engaged the customers in jokes and storytelling and dialogues, yet she'd be standing there totally naked, or at least topless. And I think there's something very interesting about that kind of candid approach to making nudity seem like it was a very natural thing in that kind of a context. And I really do think that you know, her personal charm and her, you know, was really kind of what made her an enduring character. Obviously, there were other factors as well.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I agree with everything Jonathan said. But it is also, I just find it so interesting in what she's taught me as a person. Like, I just think about how do you navigate a world where you are kind of in this exploitative environment, and yet you have this great wish to perform and do what she did. And so, what are the questions that come up around that? And then how do you have the courage inside of yourself to share your body all the time like that? And her choices that she made to augment her breasts, I, it just brings up the question, what would I do if I were her? And so I love the way that she just teaches me to like examine so many things about life and just think about things that I wouldn't normally think about. And her life is just such a, I feel, a gift to us in so many ways.
You know, it just, even in the film alone, she's fascinating, and like this, the way that she carries herself, and there's almost a sense, well, not almost, there is a sense of empowerment within this film, in the way that she carries herself on stage, and walking around topless and dancing topless, and all of these things. And I am limited male gaze here. I admit that outright. But I found it fascinating that this film looks at it from that lens, and she does. She says, "My body is the art, and the performance is going to go on. And if my route to success is the male gaze, then I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go that way." In your mind, I'm wondering, can em- can embracing the male gaze be a sense of combating it at the same time? Because that seems to be the conversation that's going on here within her.
Well, I would say to that, I think that's really personal. I think certainly some women would feel that way, like they're like turning it around or flipping it.
Mm.
Um, I I just kind of see them both existing at the same time. Like, this is the reality. There is a male gaze, and this is what I love to do. And so I don't see it as like you aren't stepping outside of the male gaze. I don't see that as possible, but you are, in the way that she had the joy that she did, perhaps that's how she stepped out of the male gaze. I guess it's just like it really varies how you would look at it, but her joy was her joy was evident and beautiful. If you have some.
Well, it's such a complicated question and issue, and I think what's interesting about the film is we kind of show that complication. Like, it's an environment. I mean, strip clubs. Now, the Condor, at the time that Carol started dancing, you wouldn't have ever called it a strip club. It was really one
Right.
of the high end nightclubs in San Francisco at that time, in an era of where nightclubs were really the most popular entertainment. I mean, Carol is coming out of a world of, much more of, Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack than she was, any other kind of world. So she really wanted to be a nightclub performer. Her various talents, may have been limited, but as she says, I wanted to get into show business, and the only way I knew it was to start showing my business. So she achieved her dream. She achieved her goal, and she created a career for herself. Now, you could say now, after that, as the tides changed, and the neighborhood changed, and the nightclub world changed on that stretch of Broadway, it became a different type of thing, where obviously you've got a male patriarchy there that is taking advantage in some ways of the women performers. And so, while some women can feel empowered in that environment, others obviously will not be. And so I think the film just raises a lot of these issues, and I think hopefully starts a lot of discussions.
No, it absolutely does. I'm glad that, because this is, watching the film, I have to confess, it's a very interesting conversation, because there's a conversation about art And when it loses that, and then I think and near the end of the film, it suggests that it's gotten out of the art and into the sleazy. And I, this is why I think it's so interesting to me, because, like you said, there are some women who used it as a way to fight back, and some who were absolutely taken advantage of. And even there were there's a number of those situations going on.
That still goes on today. That
Yeah.
that question in the movie is still a theme today. Like, can you be empowered in these environments? Can you flip the script? And or are you more someone who will feel like you're being kind of repressed in that environment?
And if you go online, obviously today, there are thousands of women who are basically performing topless, in their apartments, or even in the dressing rooms of clothing stores. And so there's this question of whether any kind of, if you call that adult performance, is a problem for the women, or are they, as one of our experts in the movie says, are they leveraging the male gaze? And it's a very fluid type of scale there.
Absolutely. I'd like to speak to that for a minute, because this film absolutely makes a great argument about the politicization of fashion, and points out the ways that the fashion industry restricts women in any number of ways, and even discusses the transition after the Second World War. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and tell me your thoughts on that. What are the ways in your mind that the fashion industry does this?
As we point out in the film, fashion has always been political. I mean, it goes back to the beginning of human experience, I'm sure. And as one of our experts points out, in the first wave of feminism, when women were trying to get the vote, there was also a simultaneously a dress reform movement, because they were wearing corsets and they could barely breathe. And I think what you're talking about, the shift after the war, is maybe the point we make in the film about how breasts became much more sexualized post-war due to the advent of formula. And so women were not breastfeeding their children in the same way. And whereas, during the war, the famous pinups, Betty Grable, it was all about the legs. So it kind of, the fashion shifted in the sense of what part of a woman's body is going to be made to be the most sexualized.
Yeah, and it makes me also think of the Free the Nipple movement today. This wasn't in the movie as much, but Carol, when she first started dancing, they had her, she had the Rudy Gernrich bathing suit, and they were having her try to keep the straps to cover her nipples, but they kept slipping off. So nipples have been like they were in the Carol Doda story as like, keep the nipples covered. We don't know. This is not legal. This is gray area. And then today we're kind of still fighting about that. Like, keep the nipples covered. And at the Oscars, women wearing the sheers, it's like a big deal when nipples are shown. So this nipple discussion is somehow a theme through from 64 until today.
If only they had Instagram when at that time. But it's a similar conversation we're taking place, and that's why I think it's so interesting, this conversation around sexuality and empowerment. In so many ways, I think is a fascinating look at the way that we restrict women without necessarily meaning to, or if that's the case, I don't know how intentional it is on a broad spectrum, but certainly there are these conversations going on which draw attention. I don't know. They change the conversation.
Well, another interesting way to look at it is when you have performers, very successful, powerful female performers like Madonna or Beyonce. Part of the act still has to do with revealing the body in various ways and to various degrees. So it seems to be a part, a very natural part of artistic expression from from female performers to have that aspect as part of the act. It's certainly not everybody, but it's not uncommon at all.
Yeah, and I just like I feel like Carol in this conversation that comes up in relation to that too is just making space for all kinds of women. Like, let's make space for the people who want to cover up and for the people who want to be like Carol, and just respect everyone and not stigmatize the Carol Dodas of the world because they happen to desire to share their body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I honestly, I appreciate the chance to speak with you both so much. Thank you so much for your time. It is a fascinating piece and raises some incredibly powerful questions, I think, along the way. So thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks very much for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Honestly, anytime. Thank you. Marlo, Jonathan, have a great day. I appreciate it.
Okay.
You too.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.